In the heart of Florence, on May 3, 1469, Niccolò di Bernardo de Machiavelli was born into a modestly noble family. His father, Bernardo, was a lawyer and scholar who loved books but struggled financially. Despite limited means, the Machiavelli household valued learning deeply. Florence, at that time, was a city pulsing with art, politics, and intrigue, home to the powerful Medici family and great thinkers of the Renaissance. From a young age, Niccolò absorbed the atmosphere of Florence, its debates, its corruption, and its brilliance. He studied Latin and classical authors like Livy and Cicero, whose writings on government would later shape his mind. Though he never received the elite education of the rich, his curiosity and intellect set him apart. Florence was both a classroom and a battlefield of ideas, and young Machiavelli would grow up to understand power not from books alone, but from the living theater around him, a city where beauty and betrayal walked hand in hand. His early experiences would become the foundation for his understanding of human nature and politics, both cruel and fascinating. Machiavelli's youth coincided with Florence's golden age, a time when art and politics collided in dazzling ways. While Michelangelo carved marble and Leonardo painted genius, Machiavelli studied the structures that govern men. He was fascinated by the rise and fall of leaders, the manipulation of loyalty, and the art of persuasion. He studied grammar, rhetoric, and philosophy under humanist teachers, who taught him that knowledge was the path to civic virtue. Yet Machiavelli's mind worked differently. He saw that virtue alone could not survive in politics without cunning and strength. His early friendships with other scholars and minor officials introduced him to Florence's inner world, where alliances shifted like sand. He began to realize that idealism rarely survived reality. By his late 20s, he had mastered not just classical ideas, but the patterns of real human behavior. This blend of classical wisdom and street-smart observation would soon thrust him into the unpredictable world of Florentine government, a world that would both elevate and destroy him. In 1494, Florence faced a storm. The powerful Medici family, rulers of the city for decades, were overthrown after French troops invaded Italy. A new republic was declared, inspired by ideals of freedom and civic virtue. Machiavelli, now in his mid-20s, saw opportunity. The fall of the Medici changed everything. The Dominican friar Girolamo Savonarola rose as Florence's moral voice, preaching against corruption and urging religious reform. For a time, Florence became a theocratic republic, strict, austere, and unstable. Machiavelli watched this experiment with fascination and skepticism. He saw how fear, faith, and manipulation shaped public life more than any divine virtue. Savonarola's fiery sermons turned to tyranny, and in 1498, he was executed. That same year, Machiavelli entered public service. His timing was perfect. As one ruler fell, another rose, and Machiavelli's life as a political thinker truly began. The fall of the Medici and Savonarola's failure left Machiavelli convinced that politics was not about morality, but about survival. Machiavelli's government career began in 1498 when he was appointed second chancellor of the Republic of Florence. Though not wealthy or noble, his intelligence and practicality quickly earned respect. His duties involved drafting official letters, organizing state affairs, and conducting diplomatic missions. This role was a front-row seat to the power struggles shaping Italy. Florence, Venice, Milan, and Rome all played chess for dominance, while France and Spain interfered. Machiavelli traveled extensively, observing kings and generals firsthand. He studied Cesare Borgia, the ruthless son of Pope Alexander VI, who would later become the model for his famous book The Prince. He admired Borgia's boldness and realism, his ability to inspire fear and loyalty in equal measure. For nearly 14 years, Machiavelli served the Republic with loyalty, organizing militia reforms and negotiating delicate alliances. His pen was sharp, his mind sharper, but he also knew that fortune was fickle. In the Italy of his time, power changed hands as quickly as the wind, and Machiavelli's own fate would soon turn just as violently. In 1502, Machiavelli was sent to observe Cesare Borgia in action. What he witnessed fascinated him. Borgia was charismatic, daring, and utterly without mercy, a man who built and destroyed lives like a sculptor shaping clay. Machiavelli admired his methods, not his morals. He saw in Borgia the embodiment of political genius, a man who knew that fear often ruled better than love. Under Borgia, cities were united, rebellions crushed, and power centralized. But his brilliance depended on fortune, his father, the Pope. When Alexander VI died in 1503, Caesari's empire crumbled. Machiavelli learned a vital lesson. Fortune could make a prince, but only skill, virtù, could sustain him. These observations became the foundation of The Prince, written years later. Though Florence had temporarily prospered, Machiavelli sensed danger. The Medici family was plotting their return, and when they did, his loyalty to the Republic would make him their enemy. His admiration for Borgia's pragmatism was not just intellectual. It was survival training for the political storms that would soon destroy his own career. While others relied on mercenaries, Machiavelli believed that a true republic should defend itself. As Secretary of the War Council, he organized a citizen militia, trained Florentine men rather than hiring foreign soldiers. He saw mercenaries as treacherous and unreliable. His belief was simple: men fight harder when defending their own land. His efforts led to military reforms, and for a while, Florence seemed more secure. But his vision faced constant obstacles: political jealousy, lack of funding, and the return of old enemies. When the Republic fought Pisa, Machiavelli's strategies showed promise, but couldn't overcome poor leadership above him. Still, he documented every lesson: how power worked, how morale was built, and how fear could be both weapon and weakness. He wasn't a general, but his insights were brilliant. His later writings would show that Machiavelli understood the psychology of war better than most warriors of his age. Yet, as Florence's fate darkened again, his reforms would mean nothing. The Medici were on the rise, and their revenge would change everything for him. In 1512, the tides of power shifted once more. The Medici family, backed by Spanish troops, returned to Florence, crushing the Republic. Machiavelli, once a trusted official of the Republican government, was instantly dismissed. Worse, he was accused of conspiracy against the Medici. Arrested, imprisoned, and brutally tortured, Machiavelli faced death. For weeks, he was stretched on the rack, interrogated for crimes he hadn't committed. Eventually, due to lack of evidence and a general amnesty, he was released. But his reputation was ruined, his career destroyed. He retreated to his small estate in Sant'Andrea in Purgatory, outside Florence. There, broken and humiliated, Machiavelli began to write. From pain and exile, his genius would emerge. He wrote letters describing how he spent his days farming by day and conversing with ancient philosophers by night. Out of his isolation, he found his greatest purpose: to understand and explain the true nature of power. His suffering would give birth to one of the most influential books in human history, The Prince. Machiavelli's exile was both tragedy and liberation. Though banished from politics, he was free to observe and think without constraint. He spent his days reading Livy, Tacitus, and Plutarch, drawing parallels between the fall of ancient republics and the corruption of his own Florence. In his famous letter to Francesco Vettori, Machiavelli described his daily ritual. After working on his farm, he would don noble clothes and enter his court of the ancients, conversing with dead philosophers. In those moments, he was no longer an exile, he was a statesman of the mind. He began writing The Prince in 1513, hoping to regain favor with the Medici by offering them practical advice on governance. The book was short, sharp, and unlike anything written before. It stripped away moral illusions and revealed politics as it truly was: a struggle for power guided by fear, deception, and necessity. Though written to please rulers, The Prince would ultimately redefine political philosophy forever, not as an ideal, but as a mirror of reality. The Prince was Machiavelli's masterpiece, a manual for rulers who sought to maintain power in a treacherous world. Dedicated to Lorenzo de' Medici, it combined his experiences, observations, and brutal honesty into one daring message. Power is maintained not by virtue alone, but by cunning, strength, and calculation. He introduced concepts like fortuna, a ruler's ability to shape fortune, and fortuna, luck or chance. He argued that fear was often more reliable than love, that appearances mattered more than truth, and that moral flexibility was essential for survival. When he wrote The Prince, he did not seek to promote evil. He sought to describe reality. Yet, many called him a cynic, even the devil's teacher. Unpublished during his lifetime, the book circulated privately, shocking and fascinating readers alike. Over time, it became one of the most important political works ever written, inspiring kings, tyrants, and revolutionaries. Through The Prince, Machiavelli secured immortality, though it cost him his reputation in life. After The Prince, Machiavelli turned to another great work, Discourses on Livy. While The Prince examined monarchy and tyranny, Discourses celebrated republican government. He believed that liberty and citizen participation created stronger states than one-man rule. His analysis of ancient Rome became a mirror for Florence, showing how laws, virtue, and military discipline could protect freedom. Unlike The Prince, this work was not for rulers but for citizens. It revealed another side of Machiavelli, the patriot who believed in collective strength. He emphasized that corruption, once it infects a state, is nearly impossible to remove. Only through civic virtue and constant vigilance could freedom survive. In Discourses, we see Machiavelli's full genius, a man who understood both the temptations of tyranny and the fragility of liberty. He was not merely a cynic. He was a realist who loved his country too much to lie about its weaknesses. In 1520, fortune turned again. The Medici family, now ruling Florence peacefully, needed experienced administrators. Cardinal Giulio de' Medici, later Pope Clement VII, allowed Machiavelli to return to public work. He was commissioned to write a history of Florence, the Florentine histories, and even given minor diplomatic missions. Though he was back in service, he never regained his old influence. Suspicions still surrounded him. Many saw him as untrustworthy or too clever for comfort. Nevertheless, he poured his intellect into writing and teaching. His art of war explored the organization of armies and the use of discipline in defense of liberty. He longed to serve his city fully once more, but destiny would deny him that. Despite his wisdom and passion for Florence, he remained half forgiven, a man both admired and feared by those in power. Yet even in the shadows, Machiavelli's pen continued shaping the world's understanding of politics. In 1527, disaster struck Italy. The troops of the Holy Roman Emperor, Charles V, sacked Rome in a wave of destruction and bloodshed. Pope Clement VII fled for his life. The event shook all of Italy, and Florence rebelled, once again overthrowing the Medici and restoring the Republic. For Machiavelli, this should have been a triumph, the return of the government he had always served. But fate was cruel. Because of his recent association with the Medici, the new Republican leaders distrusted him. He was excluded from office, heartbroken and humiliated once again. The irony was bitter. The man who had always served Florence's liberty was rejected by the very republic he loved. Exhausted, sick, and disillusioned, Machiavelli withdrew to his home. The man who had studied power all his life was now powerless, abandoned by fortune, the very fortuna he had written about so many times. In June 1527, just weeks after the fall of the Medici, Machiavelli fell ill. He was only 58 years old. The disease was sudden, and he weakened quickly. Despite his suffering, he remained sharp-minded until the end, speaking of politics and the state, even on his deathbed. He died on June 21, 1527, in Florence, leaving behind a legacy both feared and revered. His burial was modest, but his ideas were not. Machiavelli's friends mourned him as a patriot and thinker who had seen the truth of power more clearly than anyone else. His name, however, would soon become a symbol of manipulation and deceit, a misunderstanding that would haunt him for centuries. Yet in those final days, Machiavelli had achieved what few men ever do. He had looked directly into the soul of politics and lived to write about it. After his death, The Prince began circulating widely, and its shocking realism caused outrage. The Catholic Church banned it, moralists condemned it, yet rulers read it secretly, admiring its brilliance. Over time, Machiavellian became a synonym for cunning and deceit, an unfair label that ignored his deeper purpose. Machiavelli never celebrated cruelty for its own sake. He analyzed it as a tool of necessity in a corrupt world. His Republican writings showed his true heart, a love for liberty and civic virtue. But history, like politics, is rarely fair. For centuries, his name carried both fear and fascination. Yet philosophers from Hobbes to Nietzsche and leaders from Napoleon to modern politicians drew inspiration from him. His insights into power, human behavior, and fortune remain timeless, both dangerous and true. Today, Niccolò Machiavelli stands as one of history's most misunderstood geniuses. His writings continue to shape political thought, psychology, and leadership. He taught the world that power is not a dream. It is a craft, an art built on understanding human weakness and ambition. He showed that morality and politics often clash, and that to govern, one must sometimes choose survival over purity. But beyond the prince, Machiavelli was a patriot, a man who dreamed of a united, free Italy. He saw clearly what others refused to see, that men are not angels, and rulers must deal with the world as it is, not as they wish it to be. From his exile to his death, Machiavelli remained a student of reality. And that is why, even after 5 centuries, his words still echo, reminding us that the struggle between power and principle is eternal.